for as much as there is a push outwards, there appears to be a push outwards, there is also a pull back in. So when a plant emerges above the ground and below the ground, this combination of push and pull is at work and has structure and creates the kind of structures that you see in fern leaves, in pine tree structure, cone, pineapples, also in and the list goes on absolutely indefinitely. There's nowhere you can look in created nature and you do not find this golden section, which is really interesting in relation to this. That essentially gives you 1 and 2 halves and 3/3 and 4 quarters and 5/5 and 6/6 and 7/7, at which point in this series you get that, the 7th. And when music was released from the influence of the church in the Renaissance in the West, and it became secular, something began to catch on, which we now know still today as a functional harmony. The relationship between the dominant note and the tonic note. And you all know it as an amen cadence. And if you do it more sophisticated than that, you play, you put the 7th in, and the pull from the dominant 7th to the tonic creates, there is pull, there is function there. That cadence that we've all in some way, even if we've only sung Happy Birthday, engaged with in this life. And that's fundamental to the pull of C&C. The very last point I'll make is this. Up until that point in the Renaissance, the church had actually very strongly kind of legislated as to what was okay and what wasn't okay in music. And especially the thing that was not okay, in fact, they felt so strongly about it, they called it the diabolus in musica, the devil in music, was the so-called 3 tones in a row. Normally a scale would go like this. But if you went 3 tones in a row, this was diabolus in musica, the devil in music. This was disallowed. It was strictly kind of dangerous secular influence. That interval wants to pull to, the reason why it was the devil was because it can actually pull in another direction, not only to there. Ouch, awful. All sorts of things emerge from that. And the complexity that's emerged in particularly Western music is a function of managing that through a system called well-tempered. I'm just going to make a direct link and tell you that's a well-tempered climate accord. We can explain the detail of that separately, but it's fundamental to the engagement with the economist, because if you ask an economist how long is a piece of string, he'll give you as stupid an answer as probably everybody else would. I don't know, as long as you like. In other words, it's a kind of structure-free zone. So by the time the climate change politics began in 1990, a convention emerged which was signed in Rio in 1992, and the absolute objective of the convention was to stabilize concentrations of greenhouse gas, subject to the understanding that Kevin spelled out this morning. It's the aggregate of emissions, it's the integral of emissions, it's the emissions added up over time that give you the relationship with concentrations as an outcome. It's a very simple relationship. Emissions are like a tap as a flow. The atmosphere is like a bath which fills up when the tap runs into it. To stop the bath overflowing, you've got to turn the tap right off. And the question is, you've got to do it soon enough to stop the bath overflowing, and actually how much time have you got to achieve that? So you take that back to the global politics in the convention. That objective was a global objective, but it was an international treaty. All the nations of the world had to collaborate in achieving this event of stabilizing concentrations to avoid the kind of horrors that David and Kevin spoke about earlier this morning. And it was just like on day one going into, it was like South Africa all over again. They had a very ironic message in the tourist industry in South Africa when I was there in the apartheid years. It was, come to South Africa, it's a world in one country. They had no idea the irony of that comment. But the UN was that one country world on climate change politics. People came out saying, we didn't make this problem, you did, you clean it up. They're accusing us of having too many babies. On day one, it was already chaotic, and it's got worse since then, and it's mostly been, and the Kyoto Protocol to this convention has been a product of the politics of blame. It has all been trying to pass the onus for responsibility onto resolving this problem onto the guys who either made the mess or to take it away from the people who claim to be more efficient and so on. And the economists swept in a little too late to really get their key point in at root level, which was, we call it the agenda of no regrets and efficiency gains. If it's worth doing anyway, it'll turn you a buck, it's worth doing. And if it makes you more efficient in doing it, yeah, there's another good reason for doing it. And that was countering what was fundamentally in this contraction and convergence program, which was emerging underneath at that time, which was precaution. You've got to have a full-term global contraction event to stabilize concentrations, and equity, some kind of constitutional sharing of this globally to genuinely make it a one-planet solution where everybody is involved and not at the mercy of economists. Well, the second assessment of IPCC was being prepared between 93 and 95. And a well-known rogue economist called Bill Nordhaus at Yale stepped in and was immediately promoted to being the convening lead author of the IPCC's second assessment of the global cost-benefit analysis of climate change. Get your head around that one. And his position on climate change was dead simple. America has an economy to which all other economies aspire. So I'm just going to assume that what's true for us is or will be true for everybody else. And, crucially, agriculture, Patrick, is only 3% of US GDP. And if it gets warmer, hell, we got air conditioning and we got shopping malls. So that is basically the perspective you bring to bear to this massively fractious UN for you to be the convening lead author of the global cost-benefit analysis, essentially answering the question, is it cost-effective to slow or not to slow global warming? In 93, people didn't have quite the sort of excitable view of the future that is fairly commonplace now. People were still wondering whether it was happening at all. To us, and a lot of normal people, it was not only happening, it was obviously going to get much worse and probably at a rate much faster than the kind of somewhat hesitant experts were suggesting. Anyway, what I thought was, God, South Africa, think of this, they've got shopping malls and air conditioning in Soweto, in Addis Ababa, and multiply that around the planet. We went to every delegation we possibly could and said, this man who has these views is going to convene this global cost-benefit analysis, and this is his solution. I don't know how you are on air conditioning and shopping malls in Addis Ababa and Dakar and all the rest of it, but if you don't want him, you've got about a week to vote him out. Well, he was voted out. And he was very cross. And he wrote a letter to GCI, which is in this book. If you turn to page 4. It's worth really noting what's here. This very, very senior, world-renowned expert was that angry about being gotten out of this key position that he wrote a letter, which I'm not allowed to swear, so I'll avoid it. He didn't, but effectively he wrote a letter which says, how dare people like you interfere with people like me? We're doing very highly polished multi-scalar, multi-vector analysis and so on. I suppose what you object to, this is crucial, get people wound up and there's always something you can find. I suppose what you object to is that the numeraire of measurement is the dollar. Quite right, I thought. Because if that is the case, he says, you can read it in this letter, you can have it if you like in spotted owl equivalents.